Hey, welcome to the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is lesson 62, and this and the next lesson are going to be focused at the league level on team positional usages. In this case, quarterback and running back, and 63 will do tight end and wide receiver. This material is actually from the block of, what was it, 16 different lessons, team by team. As we went through that, I went through team by team kind of at that level, okay, and looked, hey, here's what the quarterbacks, how the team used them. This is stepping back and looking across the league. Okay, so you're getting a big landscape across the league and asking the questions, what teams across the league had really strong 2020 positional usages, depending for the quarterback, RB, tight end, or wide receivers. The idea being that those that were strong in that category may be strong in 2021. I spend so much time for several reasons. And if you looked at the first 10 or so, I talked about how we learn and biases and these kind of things. Part of the way that I've found to work around that, I mean, we're all biased and it's hard to get away with that. And at least we can know that we're in a minefield. We may not know quite where the mines are, right? Because we can't predict the future. But if we have a process that at least gives us a shot at dealing with the complexity and the uncertainty. And that's the best we can do. And I believe Dr. Taleb in his Black Swan said the best we can do is make Black Swan events gray, right? So we prepare that something's going to happen, but we're just not quite sure from what direction it's coming. So if I seem to spend a lot of time, that's why I'm doing it. I'm going through the data, looking at it from multiple directions, and the more I go through it, the more it became at the level of a fingertip for me, and to think about tendencies and traits from what we saw last year. Always remembering, right, that things change, right? So it's uncertainty, right? And we never quite know the boundaries of that uncertainty. So I know I spend a lot of time doing this. You're getting to see my process. Maybe I'm overkilling it, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we could just take 5 minutes and know it all and move on? Unfortunately, we can't, regardless of what you may hear about on Twitter, podcast, etc. That seems easy. Oh, I'll just listen to this, or I'll just read this article, and instantly I win the league. And I've not found it that way. So if for those that can do it very simply and frugally, then they've got me. I would listen to them, right? If and good for them. However that process works for them and they're happy, then great. I'm showing the process that I approach. That's because I was trained as a biological scientist, and this is how I have to deal with it, right? In biology, things change. What we thought 50 years ago is not what we think now, and things change daily, right? New articles are published, new material comes along, and we have to be ready to be flexible and still understand we're in a whirlwind of uncertainty anyway, right? Everything stands that we know in science until it's proven false. And so things stand, right? 2020 stands what the teams did until we get enough data in 2021 to say, oh, well, it sure is changed, or nope, it stayed the same. So, that does happen, and people will jump and say, oh, we told you it was going to be this way. They're just, the same ones that said it's not going to be this way, they're not saying anything, right? You only hear when some person says, look at me, I'm right. They don't, tell you when they're wrong, right? They don't show you all their, defeats, right? They only crow about their, so-called successes. So I do spend a lot of time doing this, probably more than most want to spend. That's great. This is my process. Okay, I'm not ashamed of it. This is what I do. This is how I proceed in biology. You read, you think, you read, you do experiments, you have questions, you test those questions, so forth and so forth. And you just kind of in some ways, it's just a circle, and you just keep going. And then eventually, hopefully, you break down a little uncertainty and you have a little more understanding of a complex system. And that's about the best we can do in science, is try to knock down some of the complexity and try to have some understanding. So that's why a lot of this seems to be, I'm going over the same material. It's good to go over it a couple times. Get it really ingrained and allow you to think about things. And therefore, when something really dramatic's like, hey, this team didn't do this, or this situation didn't happen, that's going to wake you up more than people that didn't even know what the team did last year. So how can they be surprised what they're doing this year if they don't know what they did last year? They just kind of float along. Okay, and that's just the complexity that I try to deal with. It's the best I can do it, other than inventing a time machine. Okay, enough of my soapbox here. This is the quarterbacks, and I've gone and looked at all team usages from a 5-year and 2020 perspective and looked at the differences. And this is a chart showing that, and I've lined it up from the highest differences from 2020 to their team's 5-year average to the lowest. And we see that teams have increased. The highest was 5%, the lowest was 3%. That doesn't seem like a lot, but that's more than you think as far as fantasy points. And that has repercussions throughout the other players, right? This is just a quarterback. Okay, if a quarterback can be used more and is producing more points, 5% more, that can have a nice effect on the players from that team. And the reverse is if a quarterback is declined, then the players will not probably do as well. It's good to know that, good to think about that. So I colorized, and here's the, let me click that. So here's the column here, differences here. And here are the top group here. And so notice I colorized the team names in deep green. So those were the, quote, best in 2020 compared to their averages. Notice I didn't mean the best in usage, just the best compared to their internal 5-year average. Okay, so I'm wanting to look at that comparison. And teams that went 1%, okay, are here. Teams that really didn't seem to change are in yellow. Teams that declined are in light red, and strong decliners were in deep red, right? So Arizona versus Washington, the two extreme teams as far as quarterback improvement or declines. Okay, so people talk about Cam Newton But in New England, the usage, because he ran and ran, running quarterback, we're just looking at fantasy points here. We're not looking at, the passing per se. We're just looking, what points are you giving me? New England did well. Baltimore did well. Philadelphia, all the controversy. Drew Brees, he's gone, but did well. The Chargers, Houston, the Raiders, all did well. One would expect that they have a shot to do well again next year. New Orleans is in flux. Houston may be in flux. But at least you start with an idea that, okay, we're expecting some good things here from quarterback usage. Now remember, this is fantasy points and running quarterbacks. Notice Baltimore, notice New England, notice Houston, running quarterback, rushing quarterbacks can still give fantasy points. So that's kind of mixed into this gumbo a little bit. And the issues were Cleveland, Indianapolis, San Francisco, and Washington. So people were saying, oh, Cleveland's going to get better. Well, let's hope they do, but they declined last year. Indianapolis, well, they got some new blood in there. Is that going to make a difference? San Francisco drafted a hot new rookie. Washington got Fitzpatrick. Shh. So I want you to consider that. Dallas, of course, declined a little bit because of injury to Dak. Matt Ryan declined a little bit. It's very possible the pluses and minuses of 1 and -1 and 0 really not the big thing. So my takeaway would be look at the extremes and try to guess, how 2021 may be the same or different. I believe that's the big takeaway from this here. And you start getting in your head usages of quarterbacks. In Superflex leagues, I would definitely want to have this information at my fingertips. So I plotted QB usages, 5-year average versus 20 versus differences. So I got 3 different lines of metrics here. The blue is 5-year, the red is 2020, and the purple is the difference. And here's 0. So I can't draw a straight line. But we see who increased. So maybe I should do that. Maybe we see who increased right here. And I've already marked those. Strong quarterback. And we see some of the issues for declining or lower use quarterback. I think the extremes are telling us, and notice the gaps here from red to blue here versus, this is blue to red versus red to blue. Big difference here on the extremes. So just kind of think about the extremes here. I wouldn't get too crazy with this data, but it's just something to kind of be expecting. And I think teams like New Orleans and maybe Houston might be changing. Quarterbacks are in flux. We'll see if Washington, Frisco, Indianapolis, can they get out of that? I don't know. There's some, pros and cons there. But at least you see that and can start building your thinking in your draft list there. But there that is. So I went back in a little bit and says, when I say 29% average here in Baltimore versus 19% in Washington, it's a little hard to visualize to me. 29, 19. Okay, one's bigger, but the scale to me is a little hard. So I like to change the numbers and scale them to make it easier for my thinking. So what I did is I added this column here, right here. Okay, 2020 scaled usages. And notice these numbers seem to be in the same trend, but different. What I did was took the 2020 average across the league and subtracted that from all these numbers. And what you get are these numbers. So Baltimore was 5.6 above the league average, Arizona 4.8, Buffalo 3.6. Notice that Buffalo only went up 1%, but they are now highlighted since their scaled usage was number 3 in the league. So see, sometimes you could catch some of these aspects of the data. So I kept the coloration of the unscaled data, deep green, light green, red. And so we see that Buffalo's moved up. Notice that the Chargers moved down, and Seattle, KC, and Green Bay moved up. Look at Tampa Bay, kind of moved up. But we still have the bottom 4. Regardless, they're still at the bottom. Notice Denver really dropped down using this metrics. So they're an issue. The Giants continue to be an issue. So even though they didn't do too bad, compare their 5-year average, compared to everybody in the league scaled wise, they didn't do so great. So just be aware that another way to look at the data can give you a little fresh insight. So this is the deeper information that I like. And of course, I plotted that. And these numbers are the same you've seen before. Now I plotted the scaled usages here. And we see the best, and I put them in green, and the worst are still the worst. So to me, Buffalo catches my interest, right? Notice the Chargers were less than I thought. Notice things like Denver was an issue, even though. So just be aware that things can shift a little bit if you flip the data a little bit and look at it in a different light. So that's part of my process. So if I'm a super flex league, I think Murray, Allen, and maybe even Cam, they're in the I got my old brain is gone now, but the quarterback for Baltimore here, my bad, I apologize. Anyway, those are my top 4. And if you look, probably Philadelphia, I believe Houston and New Orleans are in flux, and I would be concerned about those. Put a big question mark there. But I think these 5. So that might, I think Cam Newton, in some ways, is free in like best ball, so that would be a great QB2 type. And so whoever the Philadelphia quarterback could be a positive. I would have issues with these quarterbacks here. Fitzpatrick, people are thinking, oh, he gunslinger makes things different. But if you go to my Washington team view, I had a discussion about, I think Washington wants to run more than you think. So just be aware that it's not all, oh, I think I know what I'm doing. Always think that when you think you know everything, you probably don't. Something's missing. What's missing? Okay, running backs going to go through the same spiel that I just did, but now we're looking at running backs. So let's look at the tops and the bottoms here. And notice right away, if you look at the team, there were only two teams that really stepped it up and did 6%, Washington and Indianapolis. Notice those two were the ones where the quarterbacks declined the most. So there is a correlation there. They weren't getting the passing done, so these teams went rushing. I'm not sure they don't continue. So just be aware of that. And of course, in a standard league, maybe Jonathan Taylor, maybe Gibson are stronger than one might think. So if I was in standard leagues, I might flip the script a little bit and reach for Gibson. I think everybody's jumped on Taylor, but you might be able to get Gibson. New England, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, rushing. Detroit, New Orleans, so you see a lot of the rushing. But notice the extremes. Look at the bottom here, -4 and down. Buffalo, Pittsburgh, issues of rushing. The Jets, Arizona had issues. Notice there's a lot of concern still in the draft and in the ADPs from a lot of the quarterbacks of these bottom teams. People are not sure where to go. Dallas, I think Zeke Elliott will bounce back with Dak Prescott. So I'm not, even though it's -4, I think that's going to change. Kansas City, I think they're going to continue to struggle rushing. So think about the new rookies, who got who might increase. And if you look at the zero number, almost definitely 2/3 of the league had a zero or decline in rushing in the COVID. So it's more of a passing game. I know that. So the data's probably suggesting that. But I just wanted you to be able to focus on those teams that had issues. So I would go through, especially the deep ones here that are really had a problem, and try to sort out in your head how you should play those RBs. Okay, there's a lot of flux, a lot of things happening. It's not clarity at all. Some people say, oh, well, that could mean opportunities. It could. Okay, it could. And so just get a little deep into your homework there on the ones. So my take is I think I'm more worried about the decliners than I am the few that increase, except for Indiana and Washington. So Gibson may be a surprise. So you might get more bang for your buck this year than the ADP. So maybe he is worth reaching. I'm betwixt and between on that. Okay. Not sure how to play that. I got to think about it some more. Okay. Just because I have the data doesn't mean my opinion is frozen. It's never frozen. It needs to always be in flux. Your opinions need to be flexible. Flexibility is the only thing you can use to fight uncertainty. And when new information comes out, the more flexible you are, the more likely that you can flip your opinions if needed. Remember, we talk about confirmation bias. Lots of biases. Okay, so that is an interesting view, completely different than the QB situation. And I was a little surprised. Somebody said, 2020 usage, I'm not sure people would say, running backs were really down last year. This data is saying a bunch were. more than you would predict. If you see how far up the red numbers go, more than you would predict. So that may be something I hadn't heard about that. You hear about that? People are not looking at the league level on things. They're going directly to the, to the so-called funny lights, flash. They, will throw a name out there and get everybody all fired up. I'm not ready to do that yet. Still a little early for me. I'm just starting now to think about my opinion, marinating, as it were. So we look across here. Here's the strong. Here's the weak. And notice the gaps. When you leave Indianapolis and Washington, look at that. Look at these gaps from red to blue. And after that, it's a little bit here with New England. And I am drafting in best ball James White still. You can almost get him for free late. And notice how the red and blue almost are the same until we get to about right there. So Seattle, notice the gap, and we see this gap, and it really gets wide down here. That's what worries me, is most of the league has a bigger gap from 5-year versus last year. That last year decline. Did COVID cause that? Just be aware of that. And again, maybe last year's down was an opportunity to buy cheap, maybe in Dynasty. Think about that. Who in the running backs might be undervalued because there was that general, say, league level decline? Is that something you can capitalize on in your trades? Because people are probably not aware of that. Think about that. In Dynasty, think about that. Yeah. I went to the scaled averages. And again, when you flip the script, all of a sudden things get different in the clarity. So when we look across, we see New England is at 9.8 above the league, all the way down to Minnesota 4.6. So in some ways, this data is a little bit more inclusive of the top here. These were some really good teams for rushing. And I think people would agree with us. Here's some declining teams still. I think probably about right here. Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Philadelphia, Kansas City, Houston, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo. We've got issues. So I would be concerned deeper about those. And I would be looking to buy in Dynasty some of these running backs and be concerned maybe to unload some of these or do the flip, saying, oh, maybe they look worse than they were. Don't know. Think about new rookies, new free agents, what teams have done. Teams know what they did last year. Teams they may not know at the league level these metrics, but I assure you their metrics departments are well aware of what the teams did, and they look at the team level as well. They're paid to do that 24/7. And that drives trades and other kinds of rookie drafts and whatnot, And I don't think people give enough credit to the behind the scenes of why the moves are being made. I think it's a little bit too superficial in a lot of situations. So when we graph this, I think it's pretty clear these are some nice teams to collect running backs from. That I'm not arguing at all. I think most people would say, yes, these are the ones I'm really worried about here. So double, triple check your issues. If you can find a needle in the haystack, a sleeper running back, I would think it might come from those teams. So look at the depth. Look who could move up, who's going to surprise. Now's the time. You have a little free time. Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Philadelphia, Kansas City, Houston, Pittsburgh, Buffalo. What is going on for 2021? Where's the change? Who's going to be making that change? How can I get some depth here? Maybe the zero RB drafting, maybe that's where you need to fish in those teams, because I don't think the top teams are going to be as accessible to you, right? Maybe they will. Great. Think about that. I think this can drive your draft plans a little bit, this kind of data. It's really neat. I really feel good when I look at this. I think about it, and it's really nice. Notice, by the way, the drop off here. So to me, this is pretty much, I'm not really focused on these teams that much. I'm looking at the extremes. The extremes are telling you something. Sometimes we don't know what they're saying, but they're trying to tell you something. It's great data, by the way. I hope that this should inspire you to check all my lessons out, and it's worth your journey. I don't know. I think it is. Obviously, I do it, right? This is my process. You're getting to see what I do, okay? So, a lot of these, I've been doing this since the Super Bowl, even before. I'm doing this stuff. Every day, I'm putting time in, okay? Every day. People say this is the grind. Well, to me, it's the fun. It's not a grind. Grind sounds like something you got to do and you don't want to do it. I want to do this. A little weird. Hey, this is what I've been doing. This is who I am, and this is what I get to do. It's fun. Fun stuff. Woo woo, fun stuff. So that was all this. We will come back. I'm really excited to look at the tight ends and the wide receivers. Can you tell my enthusiasm? This is the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. Hopefully leading you to a victory this year. Doing everything I can. I'm putting it out here. Here it is. Take from the plate or not. Take what you need. Okay, come back.